I never thought my 30th birthday would begin with a moment that could destroy everything I held dear. When Emma, my wife's younger sister, showed up unexpectedly that night, I assumed it was just an innocent surprise. But her laughter, her closeness, and what followed shattered every boundary I'd ever set. One mistake, one fleeting moment, and my entire life was on the verge of collapse. My name is James, and for as long as I can remember, I've been a man of routine, a planner, someone who thrives on structure and predictability. That's why marrying Olivia felt like the perfect balance for me. She was spontaneous and vibrant, a light in my otherwise methodical world. Together, we built a life that felt solid and grounded, with a relationship that I believed was unshakable. Olivia and I had been married for 5 years, and while our marriage wasn't without its challenges, I always thought we were the perfect team. She had a knack for making ordinary moments feel extraordinary, whether it was through her love for planning events or her talent for making everyone around her feel special. She poured that same energy into organizing my 30th birthday, wanting to make it a celebration I'd never forget. I couldn't help but admire her dedication and the care she put into everything she did. Then there was Emma, Olivia's younger sister. Emma was the opposite of Olivia in many ways, bold, carefree, and unfiltered. She had an energy that was magnetic, a personality that could light up a room. Over the years, I'd come to see her as a part of the family, someone who added a spark to every gathering. She was the fun-loving aunt to our friends' kids, the life of the party, and a constant source of laughter. But I'd never thought of Emma as anything more than my wife's sister. She was family, and I never crossed that line, not even in my imagination. So when she showed up unexpectedly the night before my birthday, I didn't think much of it. I assumed she was there to help Olivia with the final preparations, as she often did. That night, though, something shifted. The closeness, the teasing, the energy between us, it felt different, unsettling. For the first time, I found myself noticing her in a way I never had before. It was a fleeting moment, one I quickly pushed aside, chalking it up to exhaustion or overthinking. Little did I know, that moment was the beginning of something I couldn't undo, a choice that would test every boundary I thought I'd never cross. The night Emma arrived, something felt off, not with her, but within me. I dismissed it as fatigue from the long day Olivia and I had spent preparing for the party. But as Emma settled into our home for the night, small things began to stand out. Her laughter, always so loud and uninhibited, echoed differently in the quiet house. The way her eyes lingered a second too long when she caught my gaze, it was subtle, yet I couldn't shake the feeling. I tried to ignore it. I reminded myself who she was, my wife's sister, someone I'd known for years. But when Olivia went to bed early, exhausted from the day's preparations, the atmosphere in the house shifted. Emma seemed more relaxed, more herself. She flopped onto the couch beside me with an ease that I envied, holding a glass of wine and joking about how Olivia always overdid things for events like this. "She's amazing, isn't she?" I said, trying to steer the conversation to safe ground. "Of course," Emma replied with a grin. "But she's so predictable. You, on the other hand. I bet you have a wild side buried somewhere." Her comment caught me off guard. I laughed awkwardly, brushing it off as one of her usual teasing remarks. But there was something in her tone, playful, almost challenging, that lingered in the air. I stood up, muttering something about checking on Olivia, but Emma's voice stopped me. "She's fine, James. You don't always have to be the perfect husband, you know." I froze, unsure how to respond. Her words weren't accusatory, but they held a weight that made my chest tighten. I turned back to face her, and the look in her eyes was unreadable, mischievous, curious, and something else I couldn't name. Over the next few days, her behavior became more perplexing. She would find excuses to touch my arm when she passed by or sit just a little too close. At first, I thought I was imagining it, but her actions grew bolder. She'd make sly comments about how lucky Olivia was to have me or how she'd never settle for someone so boring. Boring? I asked one evening, raising an eyebrow. "You know what I mean," she said with a smirk. "You're so reliable. Stable. But I wonder if there's more to you than that. Her words stuck with me, gnawing at the edges of my mind. Was she flirting? Testing me? Or was this just Emma being Emma, the carefree, boundary-pushing younger sister? I told myself it didn't matter. I was happily married, and that was all there was to it. But late at night, when I was alone with my thoughts, the doubts crept in. I found myself replaying our conversations, analyzing her words and actions. I started avoiding being alone with her, but she always seemed to find a way to corner me, her presence impossible to ignore. One afternoon, while Olivia was out running errands, Emma walked into the living room wearing one of Olivia's dresses. It was a simple outfit, nothing provocative, but the sight of her in something so familiar sent a jolt through me. She twirled playfully, laughing as she asked, "What do you think? Do I pull it off better than her?" "Emma, what are you doing?" I asked, trying to keep my tone light. "Relax, James. It's just a dress," she said, her eyes glinting with amusement. "You're so serious all the time. It wouldn't kill you to loosen up." Her words felt like a dare, one I refused to entertain. But as she walked away, her laughter trailing behind her, I couldn't ignore the tension building inside me. It was like a fire I didn't want to acknowledge, one that threatened to consume everything if I wasn't careful. The lines between what was right and what was wrong began to blur with each passing day. Emma had always been playful, but now, her behavior felt intentional. Every interaction seemed designed to draw me in closer, to test my limits, and I found myself teetering on the edge of something I never thought possible. One evening, as Olivia busied herself in the kitchen preparing dinner, Emma joined me on the patio where I sat sipping a drink. The cool evening air did little to calm the heat that had been simmering beneath the surface all day. She slid into the chair beside me, close enough that I could feel the warmth radiating from her skin. "You seem stressed," she said, her voice low and soft, a stark contrast to her usual lively tone. "Everything okay?" "I'm fine," I replied, though my voice betrayed the tension I was trying to hide. Emma leaned forward, her eyes searching mine. "You don't look fine, James. You've been avoiding me. Did I do something wrong?" Her question caught me off guard. I opened my mouth to respond, but the words wouldn't come. How could I tell her that it wasn't her fault, that the problem was me, that I was the one fighting a battle I never should have allowed to begin? Before I could speak, she reached out and placed her hand on mine. The touch was light, almost innocent, but it sent a jolt through me. I should have pulled away, but I didn't. Instead, I sat frozen, caught in the intensity of the moment. "Whatever it is," she whispered, her fingers brushing against mine, "you can talk to me. I'm here for you." Her words, her touch, they were a lifeline and a trap all at once. I wanted to believe her, to take comfort in the connection she offered, but deep down, I knew this was dangerous territory. Yet, I couldn't bring myself to end it. The following day, the tension escalated. Olivia had gone out to pick up some last-minute items for my birthday celebration, leaving Emma and me alone in the house. I stayed in the living room, trying to focus on a book, but my concentration was shattered when Emma walked in wearing a loose, oversized shirt that barely reached mid-thigh. "Do you mind if I hang out here?" she asked casually, as if her appearance wasn't a calculated move. "Of course not," I replied, my throat dry. She curled up on the couch across from me, her legs tucked beneath her. For a while, the silence between us was almost bearable, but then she shifted, her shirt riding up just enough to reveal a sliver of skin that drew my attention like a magnet. "You're staring," she said with a smirk, catching me off guard. "No, I wasn't," I said quickly, looking away. "It's okay," she said, her voice teasing. "I don't mind." Her words sent a shiver through me, and I knew I was in trouble. This wasn't just harmless flirting anymore, it was something far more dangerous. The boundaries I had always respected felt like they were crumbling beneath me, and I was powerless to stop it. That night, after Olivia had gone to bed, Emma cornered me in the hallway. I had been on my way to turn off the lights in the living room when she stepped out of her room, blocking my path. "We need to talk," she said, her tone serious for the first time in days. "About what?" I asked, though I already knew the answer. This, she said, gesturing between us. You feel it too, don't you? I shook my head, trying to deny it. Emma, this is wrong. We can't. Why not? She interrupted, stepping closer. We're adults, James. We can make our own choices. Her words left me speechless. I wanted to argue, to tell her that this was a line we couldn't cross, but my resolve was slipping. The intensity of her gaze, the warmth of her proximity, it was overwhelming. And then, before I could stop her, she reached up and cupped my face in her hands. Her touch was gentle, yet commanding, and for a moment, I forgot every reason why this was a mistake. She leaned in, her lips brushing against mine in a kiss that was as intoxicating as it was forbidden. I pulled away, my heart pounding. Emma, this has to stop. She smiled, a knowing look in her eyes. You can't deny it forever, James. I see the way you look at me. Her words haunted me long after she walked away, leaving me alone in the dimly lit hallway. I knew she was right. No matter how hard I tried to fight it, the feelings I had buried were surfacing, threatening to destroy everything I held dear. The morning of my 30th birthday dawned brighter than I felt. Despite Olivia's cheerful energy as she finalized the party arrangements, I couldn't shake the storm brewing inside me. Emma's words from the night before echoed in my mind, an unrelenting reminder of the line I had nearly crossed. I resolved to avoid her entirely that day, to focus on my wife and the celebration she had so lovingly prepared. Guests began arriving in the early evening, filling the house with laughter and chatter. For a while, I felt almost normal, distracted by the warmth of familiar faces and the comforting routine of hosting. Olivia was radiant, her smile lighting up the room as she moved effortlessly between conversations, making sure everyone felt welcome. And then, Emma walked in. She was dressed in a sleek black dress that hugged her figure, her hair falling in soft waves around her shoulders. The moment she entered, the air seemed to shift. I avoided her gaze, determined not to let her presence disrupt the fragile sense of normalcy I was clinging to. But Emma wasn't one to be ignored. She maneuvered through the crowd with practiced ease, eventually making her way to my side. Happy birthday, James, she said, her voice smooth and low. Thanks, I replied curtly, glancing around to make sure Olivia wasn't nearby. Emma leaned in closer, her lips brushing against my ear as she whispered, I haven't forgotten your real gift. Her words sent a shiver down my spine, and I stepped back, my heart racing. Emma, not now, I said firmly, hoping the noise of the party would drown out the tension between us. She smiled, unbothered by my reaction. Don't worry. I'll wait. As the evening progressed, I found it harder to maintain my composure. Every time I turned around, Emma was there, watching, waiting. Her presence was like a shadow I couldn't escape, and it was only a matter of time before something gave. It happened later that night, after most of the guests had left. Olivia was in the kitchen cleaning up, her laughter ringing out as she chatted with a friend who had stayed to help. I was in the living room, gathering empty glasses, when Emma appeared once again. Finally, some alone time, she said, her tone playful. I sighed, setting the glasses down on the table. Emma, this has to stop. Whatever you think is happening between us, it's not. Oh, come on, James, she said, stepping closer. You can't deny what you feel. I see it in your eyes every time you look at me. Her words were a knife, cutting through my carefully constructed defenses. This isn't about feelings, I said, my voice rising. This is about boundaries, about respect. Respect, she repeated with a bitter laugh. Don't pretend you're some saint. You want this as much as I do. Before I could respond, Olivia's voice cut through the tension. What's going on here? I turned sharply to see her standing in the doorway, her expression a mix of confusion and suspicion. My heart sank, the weight of the moment crashing down on me. Nothing, I said quickly, too quickly. But Olivia wasn't convinced. She looked between Emma and me, her eyes narrowing. Emma? Emma hesitated for only a moment before stepping forward, her expression unreadable. I was just wishing James a happy birthday, she said smoothly. Maybe I lingered too long. Sorry if I overstepped. Olivia's gaze shifted to me, searching for answers. I opened my mouth to speak, but no words came. The silence that followed was deafening, the air thick with unspoken truths. The rest of the night passed in a blur. Olivia barely spoke to me, her smile strained as she said goodbye to the remaining guests. Emma retreated to her room, leaving me alone with the guilt that was now impossible to ignore. Later, when the house was quiet and Olivia and I were finally alone, the confrontation I had been dreading came. She stood in the doorway of our bedroom, her arms crossed and her eyes filled with a mix of anger and hurt. "James," she said, her voice trembling, "what's going on between you and Emma?" "Nothing," I said, too quickly once again. "Don't lie to me," she snapped, her voice rising. "I'm not blind. I've seen the way she looks at you. And tonight, I saw the way you looked at her." Her words hit me like a punch to the gut. "Olivia, I swear, nothing happened. I would never." "But you thought about it," she interrupted, her voice breaking. "Didn't you?" I hesitated, and that hesitation was all she needed. She let out a bitter laugh, shaking her head. "I can't believe this. After everything I've done for you, for us, you let this happen?" "Olivia, please," I said, stepping toward her. "It wasn't like that. I love you. You're my wife." "But that didn't stop you from entertaining her, did it?" she said, tears streaming down her face. I reached for her, but she stepped back, her body rigid with anger and betrayal. "Don't," she said, her voice cold. "Don't touch me." The silence that followed was suffocating. I wanted to say something, to fix the damage I had caused, but there were no words that could undo what had been done. Olivia turned away, walking out of the room without another word, leaving me alone with the weight of my choices. As I sat on the edge of the bed, the reality of the situation hit me like a tidal wave. I had let myself get too close to the edge, and now, I was paying the price. My marriage, my life, it was all teetering on the brink of collapse, and I had no one to blame but myself. The morning after the confrontation, the house was silent. Olivia had spent the night in the guest room, her absence from our bed a glaring reminder of how far we had fallen. I sat at the kitchen table, staring blankly at a cup of coffee I couldn't bring myself to drink. My mind raced with thoughts of how to fix the mess I had created, but every potential solution felt inadequate. Emma was the first to emerge, her usual confidence replaced with a tentative unease. She paused in the doorway, her eyes meeting mine for a brief, charged moment before she looked away. "Is Olivia okay?" she asked, her voice soft. "She's not," I replied flatly. "And neither am I." Emma nodded, guilt flickering across her face. "I didn't mean to cause this, James." "You didn't mean to?" I snapped, my frustration boiling over. "You pushed and pushed, Emma. What did you think was going to happen?" Her eyes widened at the sharpness of my tone, but she didn't argue. Instead, she sighed and looked down at her hands. "I'll leave," she said quietly. "It's probably for the best." I didn't respond, and after a moment, she turned and walked away. I heard the sound of her footsteps retreating, followed by the soft click of her bedroom door. A part of me wanted to stop her, to make her stay and face the consequences of her actions, but I knew that her leaving was the right thing to do. When Olivia finally appeared, her face was pale and her eyes were red from crying. She didn't look at me as she poured herself a cup of coffee and sat down at the opposite end of the table. The silence between us was heavy, filled with all the words we were too afraid or too angry to say. "I asked Emma to leave," I said finally, my voice breaking the tension. Olivia's gaze snapped to mine, her expression unreadable. "And that's supposed to fix this?" she asked, her tone cold. "No," I admitted. "But it's a start. I don't want her here if it makes you uncomfortable." Her laugh was bitter, filled with disbelief. "Uncomfortable? James, this isn't about comfort. This is about trust. And you broke it." "I know," I said, my voice barely above a whisper. I know I screwed up. But I love you, Olivia. And I'll do whatever it takes to make this right." She shook her head, tears welling in her eyes. "I don't know if you can. I don't know if I can look at you the same way anymore." Her words cut deeper than I thought possible. "Please, don't say that," I begged. "We've been through so much together. Don't let this ruin us." Olivia stood abruptly, her chair scraping against the floor. "You let this ruin us, James. Not me." She left the kitchen without another word, leaving me alone with the crushing weight of her disappointment. I wanted to chase after her, to say something, anything, that would convince her to give me another chance, but I knew that words wouldn't be enough. This would take time, and even then, there were no guarantees. The following days were a blur of strained silence and awkward avoidance. Emma left that afternoon, her departure marked by a brief goodbye that did little to ease the tension in the house. Olivia and I barely spoke, and when we did, the conversations were short and stilted. It was as if we were both afraid to say too much, worried that any wrong word might shatter what little remained of our relationship. At work, I struggled to focus, my mind constantly drifting back to the mess I had left at home. My colleagues noticed my distracted demeanor, but I brushed off their concerns, too ashamed to share the truth. Even the smallest tasks felt monumental, and I couldn't shake the gnawing guilt that consumed me. One evening, a week after the party, Olivia finally broke the silence. She sat down across from me at the dinner table, her expression weary but resolute. "I can't keep living like this," she said, her voice trembling. "We need to figure out what we're going to do." "I want to fix this," I said immediately. "I'll do whatever it takes, Olivia. Counseling, therapy, whatever you need." She studied me for a long moment, her eyes filled with a mix of anger and sadness. "I don't know if that's enough," she said finally. "But I'm willing to try. For now." Her words were a lifeline, fragile but desperately needed. "Thank you," I said, my voice breaking. "I'll prove to you that this will never happen again." "It's not about proving anything," she said. "It's about rebuilding something I'm not sure I can believe in anymore." Her honesty was brutal, but I knew she was right. This wasn't going to be a quick fix, it was going to take time, patience, and a level of commitment I hadn't shown before. But for Olivia, for us, I was willing to try. As we sat there in the quiet, the enormity of what lay ahead began to sink in. Our relationship had been fractured, perhaps irreparably, but there was still a sliver of hope. And for now, that was enough to keep me going. The weeks that followed were the most challenging of my life. Olivia and I began the slow, painful process of rebuilding our relationship. It wasn't easy, and there were moments when I feared we wouldn't make it. Trust, once broken, is not something that can be mended overnight. It requires patience, vulnerability, and a willingness to confront the darkest parts of ourselves. We started counseling at Olivia's request, a move I initially resisted but quickly realized was necessary. Our sessions were raw and emotional, forcing us to lay everything bare. I admitted my faults, my weaknesses, and my failure to set boundaries when it mattered most. Olivia expressed her hurt, her anger, and the deep sense of betrayal that had shaken her to her core. "Do you even understand what you've done?" she asked during one session, her voice trembling. "It's not just about what almost happened with Emma. It's about the fact that I trusted you, James. I believed you were the one person who would never let me down." Her words stayed with me long after the session ended. She was right, I had let her down in the worst way possible. The realization was like a weight pressing down on me, but it also became my motivation to change. I couldn't undo what had happened, but I could work every day to prove that I was worthy of her trust again. Emma, for her part, stayed away. She sent a brief apology via text, but I couldn't bring myself to respond. I needed to focus on my marriage, and any contact with her would only complicate things further. Olivia never mentioned her sister again, and I knew better than to bring her up. That chapter of our lives was closed, though the scars it left would take time to heal. As the days turned into weeks and the weeks into months, Olivia and I began to find our footing again. It wasn't the same as before, how could it be, but there were moments of light amidst the darkness. Small gestures, like sharing a laugh over an old memory or holding hands during a quiet evening walk, reminded us of what we were fighting for. The experience changed me in ways I hadn't anticipated. I became more mindful of my actions and their impact on those around me. I learned to value the quiet strength of commitment and the importance of setting boundaries, not just with others, but with myself. Temptation is a test we all face, but it's how we respond to it that defines who we are. Looking back, I can see the cracks in our relationship that existed long before Emma arrived. They were small, almost imperceptible, but they were there. I had taken Olivia's love for granted, assuming it would always be there no matter what. It took nearly losing her for me to realize just how much I had to lose. Now, as I sit here reflecting on everything, I feel a deep sense of gratitude. Not for what happened, there's no justification for that, but for the chance to learn and grow from it. Olivia's willingness to give me another chance is something I will never take lightly. She didn't have to stay, but she did, and for that, I will always be thankful. Our story isn't perfect, and it never will be. But it's ours, and that's enough. Every day, I wake up with the intention to be better, for Olivia, for myself, and for the life we've built together. It's not about erasing the past, it's about learning from it and moving forward with honesty and integrity. If there's one lesson I've learned through all of this, it's that trust is the foundation of every relationship. Without it, even the strongest bond can crumble. But with effort, humility, and love, even broken trust can be rebuilt, one day at a time. If you were in Olivia's position, could you ever forgive? Or, if you were James, how would you prove your love and commitment? Share your thoughts in the comments below. I'd love to hear your perspective. Don't forget to like this video and subscribe for more stories that dive into the complexities of love, trust, and redemption. Stay tuned for the next story. You won't believe what happens next.